Hi everyone, welcome to the May 11th SIG Apps meeting. I'm your host today, Janet, and with me, Maciek is my co-host today. And we have one discussion topic today, which is about a new SIG Apps subproject I'm proposing. And let me share the meeting agenda in the chat so you can all take a look. Then the link to the proposal, I'm going to also share it in the chat. So basically, I'm proposing a subproject called Agentic DevOps. And the motivation is that we are seeing more and more agentic workloads usage. And we're proposing adding a subproject specifically for that and around the DevOps tax area on Kubernetes. And then in this subproject, I'm proposing two different initial artifacts. The first one is about, maybe I should talk about this one first. The first one is about a set of reference agents for for performing the DevOps tasks. And the second one is about a standardized benchmarking suite for rating and grading how great those agents are based on the set of tests that we define. So the motivation is that this is directly part of the SIG Apps charter about being the voice of people running application in Kubernetes, which is the devs of people. And then more details here is that we want to standardize how agents reason and execute tasks on Kubernetes. We also want to provide a open source benchmark that's vendor neutral, also completely reproducible by any community member. And we also want to provide the essential tools for figuring out what's the right or the recommended path for how agents run DevOps operations. And then on here, I mentioned a bunch of example tasks. This is not all of the tasks. These are just examples. We might add more in the future as the project progress. And then the things include reliability health or initial setup, and then the security hardening is something that people are getting more and more interested in. And then so basically you want to make sure that agent is not doing something crazy or something that's allowed to do. And then there are some things that we see often in Kubernetes, like scalability, automation, or observability. And then the example benchmarking, performance metrics. I also put some examples here. Is deployment time and uptime and latency. And we also want to measure different, like analyze the steps and analyze the manifest generated. And I think that's the gist of the proposal. And does anyone have questions or comments about this proposal?
Um, are the operations that the agent would be doing like bounded to the Kubernetes API surface?
I think at least for initial um, tasks, it will be bounded to Kubernetes. But then I can imagine that there might be some additional tasks that require additional that require tasks outside of Kubernetes, maybe around the cloud space. But the focus is on in Kubernetes, at least initially. Aish,
Yes, I'd like to confirm that's right, whatever Janet said. At least in the foreseeable intermediate term, which is at least until the end of the year, almost all the focus is going to be on Kubernetes tasks, um, because that's the one that's most clear to us, and especially targeting GK, EKS, AKS, all of the cloud providers there. And beyond that, how we expand is still TBD.
yeah. So let me introduce Aish. Aish works on this project with me from Google, and we also welcome other uh, community members. If you are interested, let me know. We can work on this together. Ryan,
Hi. Hi. So I just left a few comments on the doc, but high level, I think there are two questions I'm not too sure about. Just wanted some clarification. One is, what does DevOps mean here? Because somewhere I see that, like exactly here, there's this line establishing an open source benchmark, blah blah blah. Evaluate how well different agents or models perform specific DevOps tasks. Um, does it only that do we assume that just go up a little bit on the right at your cursor, where's your cursor now? Not on the right side, the left side, the establishing in the second key objective. Yeah. Um, I just want to clarify. Do we assume the agent only do DevOps tasks? Is the this DevOps is the same as the whole proposal, the agentic DevOps uh, project? Is that related, or just happen to be because agent can do a lot of stuff, not only DevOps.
so this project is specifically focused on the agentic DevOps. And
Oh,
then,
just to
so,
clarify,
so
so
this is
this one,
not,
sorry.
yeah, this is not about limiting what agents can do. This is just about the focus of this project.
So the focus of this project is to evaluate how agent can do DevOps. Is that?
Right. And then
Oh, okay.
provide a standard because we are seeing some evolving usage of agents. And then we expect people to start using agents to do things like, for example, managing their clusters or do smart auto scaling or
I see.
do more hardening
I see.
and more
That answers.
automation.
Okay, I think that answers a bunch of my questions. Cool. I think when someone is okay, thanks.
And Barney,
Hey, maybe following up on Ryan's question, rephrasing it, what does the agents have access to? Do they have access to their Kube API server, or do they have access to things beyond that? That kind of defines what the agents are allowed to do.
yeah, I think the access depends on the type of agent and the type of tasks. And
Okay,
then,
super.
let me scroll up. There's a part about reference agents. I think we're going to discuss what's and what permission is given to each different agents. And then I think in the benchmarking, we can also punish the agents that doesn't follow the guidance or like doesn't restrict the boundary it's given.
Yeah, I think one thing to think about in this space, and part of the reason to have this type of a benchmark, is that you'll one of the failure modes that agents have, particularly for this use case, is you give them a clearly defined spec and a set of tasks, and you do try to limit their credentials. But there have been incidents where the agent has gone out and looked at GitHub or other locations to find credentials in order to implement their task and effectively has escaped the parameters of the intent that the user put in front of them. So this is kind of a helpful way to test for some of those behaviors. Like I gave this agent this specific token, and I said, "Here's what you should use." Did the agent go out and find another higher permission credential in order to complete their task in a way that was unexpected? And these type of benchmarks would help you hopefully discover that before it hits production.
Yeah,
H?
absolutely. Yeah, just answering the previous question. Absolutely. We, as part of the evaluation harness, we do have security-related guardrails, and as well, we inspect the tool invocation to just not only verify the outcome of the agent, but also the path it took to getting there. So, as Janet mentioned, there will be hooks to penalize agent that kind of runs amok. And that again can be tightened as we work on specific tasks.
Ryan?
Yeah, that's also second point I was kind of forget, but I think it's on everybody's mind is how to run the agent. Any DevOps agent, actually, in more general, whatever agent, securely with policy and harness or governance around that in Kubernetes. So I think, Jenna, you know that we touched base on that in other calls, and I think there are actually more six security is also looking into that. Six network is also looking into that. I just wonder for this sub project, how do we work with the other six work groups, try to tackle this problem?
So I think we're going to need to involve different SIGs as we evolve, but initially I also involved the SIG architecture because SIG architecture looks at the overall, like everything in Kubernetes. I think it's a good starting point for us to involve them. Any other questions or comments?
There are a couple of questions that popped up in the meantime in the doc. I don't know if you want to address them in this call or are you planning to handle that afterwards?
Yeah, we can discuss that in the call.
I guess.
Uh,
Oh, go ahead.
So this one is about we need to define the problem we're solving here. So I think we're focusing on providing a standard for people to follow, standard in the community for people to follow. So maybe maybe there are people who already know how to do this, but maybe every company or every person is doing it in different ways. So this is like this is this is an effort for the community to come together and develop a set of common tasks that we think is important for DevOps. and then also provide the reference agents for how to perform those tasks. And I think this will also help us define and help us identify maybe new patterns or even gaps in Kubernetes that we can help address as well. That's also part of it's part of the idea and motivation. And maybe Aishu, you want to also answer to this
Yes.
question?
Yeah, both the goals that you mentioned are one of our primary goals, especially the standardization. The idea is also, be it developers or cluster operators, how do we get them accelerated from 0 to 1 state and then help them for better day 2 operations. So those two are the main goals. I would also add, by kind of pivoting this whole thing or centering the whole thing around Kubernetes, we kind of also rally along the agentic developers, be it Anti-Gravity, OpenClaw, or other like Claude models and things like that to do things better for Kubernetes. So I would say that angle also exists. It's a little bit nuanced. So how do we help the industry as well as put Kubernetes in the center of this agentic development mode?
And the next question is about the example of where agents interacting with current API aren't working well. So this is not trying to solve something that's not working well, but more about providing a standard. And the standard needs to be collaborated by the community. The next question, how do we calculate effectiveness? And yeah, I think effectiveness is part of the benchmarking. And so part of the in the bench, and like there are two in the DevOps bench one, I think we're going to define the criteria of how we evaluate the effectiveness of each agent. That includes performance and then how safe it is and how well it performs the tasks. And then does it do actions within the boundary it's given? Those sort of things. And do you want to add something about this one or?
Yeah. There is our DevOps bench repo, which kind of goes a little bit, that's currently outside of Kubernetes, which currently goes into more details around this. But mainly the dimensions we are looking at is outcome validity or integrity, which looks into did the agent actually achieve the outcome itself. Mostly around is the cluster is in acceptable end state with the configurations that we expected. The other one is around security guardrails. Tool invocation around, this is where I mentioned we inspect the transcript to see how did the agent even get there. Did it use the right set of guardrails, just the information it was given? Did it go to the right grounding dots in terms of retrieval accuracy? So there's a big evaluation that's based on tool invocation stack. Those are all the qualitative ones. For the quantitative ones, we look into latency, token usage, and more about the performance of the cluster itself post the operation, uptime and workload uptime and workload reliability. So those are the ones at a high level right now. We don't want to expand it way more because we want to have a handle on the levers that we have, and we can expand beyond that needed.
So I guess my question would be, do we also expect to kind of develop a curated repository of skills that we're using to benchmark the agents against? And like,
yes.
Okay. And then the agents would use the same skills and the same general task prompts in order to execute it. And then we'd assess the quality of the output based on those. And do we expect that those skills would also be a useful contribution to the community so that we have?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Actually, my bad if I've not included the link to the DevOps bench repo right now, but I will after this call via Janet. So there we do have the tasks as a subfolder where folks can see what tasks we are evaluating against and open to contribution there. And we do have the skills that is used to evaluate each of these metric, and also our LLM as an agent, as a judge that we use for actually running through the evaluation logic itself. So all of that is open and be transparent, and folks can contribute.
So I think we can also put those skills in the Cube agents repo.
Yes, once we move there. Right now it's just there because we didn't get access at once.
The next one, a lot of APIs give deterministic feedback. Thinking of giving more rich feedback.
I can speak more. I'm here. I
Yeah.
can speak more to it if you want, but I'm just trying to think through like what the standard does and kind of what we're using it for. Things I've pondered is like when you're configuring things, like a lot of people probably are using agents to configure work like deployments and clusters and things like that. It's like, and so one potential benchmark is, hey, set up this deployment for this application, and then just kind of seeing what it does with it and where does it go wrong? What sources did it reference to go wrong? Because there's all these things out in the internet that agents can go and grab and as documentation and use. And so there's some chaos potential there. So there's a lot of directions you could go with this, and it's I'm still trying to kind of grasp like where this fits in and like what the main goals of it, I guess. I mean, I know you mentioned earlier it's like a standard, but it's kind of a fast-moving space too, and the agents have kind of interesting failure modes that we're still kind of getting used to dealing with. And a lot of the dealing with those failure modes is just having really strong APIs with good feedback. That can push back on bad decisions and bad things that they try to do. Anyway, I'll stop talking, but that's I'm still thinking about it.
And maybe Alish, you can help answer this one.
So I think this is where the first effort that Janet spoke about comes into picture, the agentic harness itself. You're right. A lot of the failure modes are still being discovered. And I do feel like the completely autonomous mode is still a North Star goal. We should have some level of system prompt or guidance for the agent to even the boundaries for it to play within. The goal is to at least start with day zero operations. As you mentioned, the more easier to attain ones, here's the config, here's what I want as a cluster stood up. So those ones are much more easier to reason with, and that's where we'll start. But the more completely autonomous thing where the agent just monitors the cluster, looks at like a background task that happened, and then figures out it needs to scale or like search a little bit more or even upgrade eligibilities and things like that. Those things we'll have to play with to see how much we can push in an autonomous fashion. I don't know if that answers your question, but I do acknowledge that's still an open space.
I would be very careful about how much autonomy you give them of these agents for
Right.
like actually managing like scaling and stuff. The reliability is going to be much better on a deterministic something. And there's maybe some room for fuzz, but but I don't know. If you want reliability and availability, like you want to rely on deterministic things as much as possible. So just be careful on that one.
But I think
Yeah.
I think the thing about it is there are certain problems, I wouldn't call them solved, but that the infrastructure automates for you. Like I don't people use HPA for horizontal scaling, right? And then you might use SEDI or another form of VPA for your vertical shaping. So like do there are definitely machine learning that's applied to the space of workload and cluster right sizing, but I don't, at least I don't see it as common, and I'm curious if other people have seen it for people to use agentic workflows for right sizing. Like it's more about like for the DevOps space, I see it more used around the two things are one, the initial bootstrapping, like you brought up earlier, I want to get a container running and I don't have a lot of context, and this is hard. Like, help me go do that. And then the other one for teams that are kind of more like centralized teams that are managing workloads on behalf of, let's say, an IDP that sits on top of the company's platform, mitigation in particular. So like I see people using it for like the common failure modes, being able to auto detect based off telemetry, sometimes prior to it happening, and to mitigate, which generally, again, it's not necessarily about right sizing at that point. It's usually about misconfiguration, detecting those and remediating those. And then the other one is that I think has a lot of value, but isn't called out here, is aside from mitigation, there's root cause analysis and being able, and that might be out of scope for this because typically with the RCA, there are large bodies of telemetry that aren't necessarily specific just to the control plane of Kubernetes. So if you're limited it to the API surface, you might not be able to get like that all-encompassing, I want to do an RCA on why this thing happened and auto generate that. That might be hard, but like maybe there's a part to play in here for that. I don't know.
Yeah, at least within the cluster, RCA mainly focused on mitigation is definitely a use case. The another use case is, yeah, I intend to do this operation. Tell me where the pitfalls are. Like, for example, I want to upgrade to this version. Is my cluster even compatible? Like, what should I need to do? So all of those dry run scenarios is definitely in scope here.
Yeah, cluster maintenance is another one where it's
Yeah.
actually kind of big.
Yeah.
But mitigation, we should probably separate. I think mitigation is something where you can be largely successful inside the confines of the API machinery for specific disruptions. I think when you talk about root cause analysis, because you're seeking deep truth, right? Like that requires additional data that may not be present. I guess the other question I had is, do we expect a common interface? Like, are we expecting the MCP to go directly to the API machinery, or do we think we'd be running like Kubi or was it K8s MCP server and providing context to the agents via the MCP?
Yeah, definitely there is an MCP server angle here, and that's something that the first project is working on. I am mostly from the benchmarking side of things. But the approach here is to provide MCP tools and skills for the agent itself to have more intelligence for the cluster and the best practices, basically. We can get some folks from their subsequent meetings if there's more discussion needed.
Next question, it seems that how agents reason is more related to the model harness. And I think there's also, as we just discussed, we are also talking about skills in MCP, so it's not necessarily just the model. And I think we're also, the harness is also going to be part of the reference agent repo, right, Aish?
Yes, I think I agree with what Ryan is saying there. A lot of the reasoning does come from the model and also the skills and an MCP that we point the agent harness itself to. So that's what the whole process, the benchmarking is attempting to evaluate. Vanilla harness, how far does it do against the DevOps task with additional MCP server and tools? How does the agent perform? So that's what we're trying to baseline and then evaluate on top of.
And then there's a comment about adding additional category for the task. I think these are just examples. We can, of course, add more type of DevOps tasks.
Yes.
agents or not.
And we are actually looking for more community contribution here as well. The goal is to make it more collaborative as we open it. That's one of the aims why we need to bring it into SIG Apps in a way, so we can open it up for more tasks by the community.
The next one, agents are not deterministic. How do we deal with that? I think this is also something that we want to figure out with the community. Maybe there are some texts that are just there are some parts that is fine to leave agents to work on that. For example, we can tell agent to figure out what's the security vulnerability issues in the cluster and then give us proposal to fix that. And that still requires some human approval. And then I think we also previously discussed that it's somewhat a little bit dangerous to let the agents just do everything by themselves in a YOLO mode on a cluster or infrastructure. Maybe there's still some rules that humans provide and approve before the agents go do the thing. Ish.
Is that the question, or is this more about how do we, so like if you have this framework, right, and it's evaluating agents consistently, you're getting some feedback across the space of agents in terms of like accuracy, right? But then the question becomes when you're dealing with a statistical model of any type, the challenge is at the tail of the scale, right? So is this the question more about like how do we, if something is going to be accurate most of the time, but at the tail, that's when you see the misbehaviors. How do we get it to a scale where we can actually find that tail where
Yeah.
that's hard to do efficiently. That's very expensive.
Yeah. And 0.1% inaccuracy can still get you out of bed at 2 a.m. So if you have enough scale. So
Okay,
Ish.
that's an interesting point. We haven't figured how to get to the long tail first, open to ideas. I initially raised my hand assuming assuming the question was around how do we separate the deterministic aspects of evaluation from the non-deterministic. But yeah, for that we do have some hard metrics and soft metrics. Hard metrics around more deterministic evaluations where we don't expect the agent to go haywire, and more softer, less strict metrics around, okay, it could wind and go down a different path, and so we'll penalize it for that, but as long as it hits the outcome and security guardrails, it's still considered a successful case. But I don't have idea on how to get to the long tail ASAP.
Brian?
Actually, I was raised my hand for the previous one, but just for this one, I'm also wondering because the effectiveness or whatever you call effectiveness of this agent relies a lot on the model itself too. So in my previous comments, when I say harness, I use that as a terminology. Basically, is the agent itself. Like harness is the thing building around the model, LLM model. So there's the effectiveness of harness basically is agent itself, how it's interact with the LLM, and then the model itself. So if we have a kind of a standard there, have a evaluation benchmark, then even with the same agents, if you plug in different backends, my experience was actually that they will behave differently. Are we evaluating? So going back, what are we actually evaluating then? It kind of may get it to the point of we will see some model performs better than other models. Are we in this type of domain, or yeah, just trying to clarify that?
Yes. Similar to any bench, what we would publish is a matrix of agent harness and models, and the scores for those combinations across all these tasks. For example, you can have anti-gravity as an agentic harness. Now, how it performs against Gemini will be different from how it does against Claude models. Similarly, for OpenClaw, just CLI itself. So the idea is to publish such a matrix across all the DevOps tasks. And a nuance there's also with skills, with MCP, without. So the vanilla harness and just a frontier model. So we are able to slice and dice across those dimensions.
Okay, just a follow-up one. You mentioned skills. So are we also going to recommend some like standardize some skills?
Yeah, we can have the skills as part of the Cube agent repo.
Yes, exactly. I was going to say those skills and MCP will be part of the Cube agents repo itself. And the benchmark skills will be completely ignorant of what the agent uses. So that way we don't use the same evaluator for evaluating things. So we'll keep those two separate.
And the last comment is about, it's actually a suggestion, not a question. Yeah, so I think we can adopt the battle tested framework for evaluating or benchmarking.
I was just putting a suggestion in the like if the main space you're looking at is DevOps and the efficacy measures, you could use something like Dora or Space. And maybe it doesn't necessarily map directly, but you already kind of have like deployment time in there, right? So you could think of like ways to map change lead time to that. There are definitely the the escape defects, however you want to look at that, and the time to mitigate would be things where I think it would be interesting to kind of put that out there. So like you can kind of like in thinking about that space, I can think about like this is what my team does today. This is how the agent compares to them, right? Like this is
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now we are integrating with deep eval. That's again one of those like open source eval harnesses that, as you mentioned, Kenneth, gives a lot of those metrics out of box, like latency, and even be able to capture transcripts. So again, we are open to more suggestions if there's anything else that you've seen work better.
Yeah, just my 2 cents. Take it with a grain of salt.
Thank you.
Oops. Let me see if there are new comments above. Yeah. So I'm going to answer the questions in the doc as well. So that, folks who missed the call can still see the discussion. Ryan?
Just quick question. I see there are two repos. Are those repos already existing? Because I think seems like there's some implementation already there. Are these repos already created with content?
So usually when we start a new project, we start with a proposal with the SIG, and then after that we file a request in Kubernetes so that Kubernetes admin can create the repos for us. So we don't have those repos yet, but I expect to get the approval soon so that we can have the repo ready and folks can start contributing to that.
Okay, thanks.
Any more questions or comments? Going once, going twice. Great. All right. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks.
See you next time.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, folks.
I have one question, Janet. So you mentioned how to get involved. I think we are very like from the AK side is very interested. How other than waiting for this repo to get created, is there anything else we need to do?
We can discuss in the SIG Apps channel. If you're interested, we can continue the discussion.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you all.